Hey everybody, Joe Popp from the Popp Rock Shop podcast, or Poppcast as we like to call it. And today I am so lucky to have one of my heroes, Thommy Berlin, in the studio today. And Thommy was a big influence of mine that he doesn't even know how much of an influence he was. But we're going to talk to him today and see what he's got to say. Thommy, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man.
Right.
This is a wonderful facility you've got here, man. You did an excellent job with it.
Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, man. And thank you for asking me to be here.
Yeah, no problem. Where were you born, Thommy? Let's start from the very beginning.
I was born in the Bermuda Triangle.
Really?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
It all becomes clear now. Yes, I'm Miami. That's the bottom corner of the Bermuda Triangle.
And you lived there till how long?
Till I was 16 years old.
And when did you start playing guitar?
When I was 11.
And what were your earliest influences back then?
Oh, man, it was whatever happened on the radio. And in Miami, we grew up with rock and roll, obviously, but we also grew up with reggae, calypso, soca, world music. There's a song, "It Is True," da-da-na-na-na-na-na-na, which was a Eurovision song from, like, what, 70, 71, something like that. Well, I would hear stuff like that. And, of course, the Beatles. Beatles were totally unescapable in the 60s. Rightly so. They were great, you know. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Paul McCartney so much. I'm more of a George Harrison fan, actually, than anything.
Okay.
But oddly enough, my first instrument was not guitar. It was drums.
Wow, okay. And you were, how old, 11 you said?
Yep.
And how old, or what year was that?
Oh, that would have been 71. No, it would have been 1970.
So you're born in 59?
58.
58, okay. And you're still kicking.
Arithmetic, man.
I can't do it. And how long were you a drummer for?
Until I hurt my wrist. I was in my 20s.
Oh, so a long time. You didn't
Yeah.
start playing guitar until...
Oh, no, I started playing guitar along with
drums, okay.
So what happens, right? I'm playing drums, and, you know, I end up being the singer in the band. I was the lead singer, oddly enough. I was the guy who did most of the singing in most of the bands I've been in. Not that I wanted to be the singer. Mm-hmm. It's just that's how it ended up.
So what was your first band called? It was in Miami?
Sahara.
Sahara, okay.
Yeah.
And what was the sound of that band?
It was Deep Purple-ish.
Wow, okay. Which was common at the time, I'm guessing, right?
Of course it was.
Yeah.
I mean, Deep Purple were one of the, you know, and then when they came out with Smoke on the Water, it was, you know. Mm-hmm. But we didn't like that one as much as we liked In Rock, you know, which we liked much more.
Right, right.
But as I became more aware of lyrics, Deep Purple became less and less interesting because Ian Gillan's a great singer.
Yeah.
I mean, fabulous singer, but the boy can't write lyrics. I'm sorry, man, he can't. He's, you know. So David Bowie puts out a record called Diamond Dogs. At the end of this conglomeration of songs called Sweet Thing Candidate and Sweet Thing Reprise, there's a guitar part at the end of it. And it's a rhythm guitar part, and it's noisy, and it's squealing, and it's like just the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. And I said, I'm going to play guitar, and I'm going to sound like that.
You're in Sahara in Miami.
Yeah.
When did you relocate to Jacksonville? How old were you, and what year was that?
There's a lot of moving in between. My folks thought the world would come to an end because, you know, that's what they thought. It was the 70s. And so they left Miami and moved to a farm in upstate New York. Talk about culture shock. In Miami, if there was a fight, it was a serious thing. In upstate New York, they would fight just to see who was tougher, which I thought was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. Mm-hmm. And it was like, get the fuck out of here. What are you, some kind of child, you know? Mm-hmm. So I was very popular in high school, which might have been why when I went to House of Guitars which is a music store in Rochester, New York. And I walked in, and they're playing punk rock. And I don't mean the New York Dolls, who I already knew about, you know. And I already knew about the Dolls. I already knew about Iggy. I already knew about Roxy and Bowie and all those. That's what I listened to. But I heard the Damned and the Sex Pistols for the first time. And I heard the Ramones for the first time. And so I'm sitting there going to get some strings or sticks or whatever it was I was buying. And there is a guy standing there, and he goes, God, this is three-chord shit. This is awful. And the guy, who I didn't know at the time, was actually the owner of the store. He goes, yeah, I remember when they said that about Hendrix. And I was like, oh, wow. Because I loved Hendrix, you know. Even when I was a drummer, I loved Hendrix. Well, who wouldn't? Mitch Mitchell?
Yeah.
Okay, New York, I moved to Naples, Florida, which was a great place to go if you like drinking. Because that's pretty much all there is to do in Naples, Florida. I was about losing my mind going from New York, where all this, whether you knew it or not, and I did know it, there was all this stuff happening. Punk rock was happening. All this music was happening just up the road, you know? And get to Naples, Florida, and I was losing my fucking mind. And there was a band in Fort Myers called the Panics. Thank God for the Panics. They saved my life. They had a couple of records out, and they were early practitioners of DIY. They had a version of Little Red Book, which was a Burt Bacharach song covered by Love.
Wow.
I just got out my Little Red Book the minute you said goodbye. Anyway. And they had a record with that, and the guy who paid for the single, because that's how they got it done back then, you know, there would be a guy who would act as a producer. And they said, sure, we'll cut that song for you if you pay for a couple of songs for us.
And this is what, 76, 77?
Oh, no, this was 78.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There were the Panics, there was Roach Motel, the Chicklids from Miami, the Wads in St. Augustine. And I know I'm leaving somebody out, but those were the earliest punk rock bands in North Florida, in Florida.
Let's talk about when you got to Jax and the Stevie Stiletto. I mean,
so that was a girl's fault. I met I met this girl at a Mr. Dunderbox, and she was wearing a Sex Pistols t-shirt. And she was 5'10", and she was beautiful, man. And she was super cool. Of course, what ends up happening is a friend of mine came by, and we were enjoying the happy hour. And back then, you know, we needed beer helpers. And so he goes, hey, have you ever had this? And I didn't know what he was talking about. No, give me some. I ended up getting pretty polluted.
What was the beer helper? What drug was it?
They were benzos and painkillers.
Wow. Okay.
And so I was pretty polluted and went and urinated in the fountain in the middle of the mall, which is where Mr. Dunderbox was. It was in a mall. And so, being appropriately impressed, me and Dish Lavu, Trish, she decided that I was worth spending some time with. Long story short, that's how I ended up in Jacksonville. I ended up in Jacksonville because I urinated in a fountain in public.
Well, that's one way to get here. Tell us about Stiletto. Was that your first, not your first band, but, the band to get some notoriety?
Yeah, I guess so. Because the other two bands I had that had, who had actually had gigs, I don't think anybody had ever heard of them. One was called The Puns, and the other one was called Euthanasia. And, yeah, Youth. And those two bands played around Florida, but, I don't think we ever, moved the needle any. And although I still play one of the Puns songs,
Okay.
yeah, man. It's a surf rock song called Punishment.
Puns making puns.
Imagine that.
So the first time I ever saw you, I don't know what year it was. I guess it was 85. Was that when you joined the band?
84, 85, yeah.
Yeah, and I saw you, and I was, just out of high school, and I was like, I never saw a real punk band before. I mean, I saw some bands that were new wavy kind of thing, but you guys were the real deal. And I just remember seeing that, and it was just like this explosion on stage, and I was like, this is nuts. Whatever this is, I want to do it,
Yeah.
And I was like, so you were a hero of mine from way back when, because I was playing like classic rock stuff and, The Who and things like that. And then after seeing your band, I was like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
So you were
very
a
cool.
huge influence on me. And
I'm sorry, Joe.
No, worked out great for me. Look at this studio,
I know, dude. I know. Hey, look, I did pretty good, didn't I? Woohoo!
And you guys were one of the bands that gets mentioned. You were just on the cover of
Henry Rollins'
new book.
It was called "It's a Bogus Life," and it was the one where we all bought masks and turned them inside out because that would be backward masking. Well, musicians want to be comedians want to be musicians, and
Absolutely.
Really they should not.
Right. Neither one should cross over.
No, they really should. They should be happy with where they are. But that record was the second record I made with Stevie. Third recording, second release I made with Stevie Stiletto. The first release was called Special Club Mix, and that was great. It really was. I was very pleased with that.
And that
record.
was 85?
Yeah, early 85.
Okay.
And then we did It's a Bogus Life. Excuse me. We did It's a Bogus Life, and I wrote a couple of things from the Special Club Mix, because I was like adding middle eights and whatever, because the guy they had for a guitar player before me was, I never met the guy. I don't know him. But what I can tell you from his music, he was a 1-4-5 guy. Mm-hmm. And really, you get much past 1-4-5, he was out of his depth. Mm. And for me, it's like, that's a waste. You've got to go elsewhere to keep the ear interested. You can't just play. Look, Johnny Winter was genius, but I've seen Johnny Winter play like 3 times. And, buddy, by the time you see 45 minutes of Johnny Winter, you've heard it.
Right, the 1-4-5 blues over and over.
Over and over.
And while you were in Stevie Stiletto, you guys had a practice space that you converted into a club, right? The 730 Club. And I think I saw JFA there, or been to a few shows there. And the JFA bus was parked outside. And
the bus that had more skateboard stuff than musical gear.
So talk a little bit about what formed that. Like, what was the idea behind that? Just having a place to play?
Knowing us, it was to get the rent paid. Mm-hmm. We never converted it. We built a stage in it because we wanted to have a stage to set up on, and if that's conversion, then okay.
Okay, what, like you didn't do a club build out? You just opened the doors and
that was that. And that being said, we brought Black Flag here, JFA here. DOA played here, Toxic Reasons played here, Tex and the Horseheads played here, the Minutemen Meatmen played here. Mm-hmm. Sadly, the Minutemen, although we were trying to book him, D. Boone died before we got a chance to get him here, and that was heartbreaking for me.
Yeah, that's 86 or 5? 85.
5 or 6. Yeah. And but I mean, bands that you would never have seen in Jacksonville, we brought. Mm-hmm. And
would you open for them?
Sometimes.
Yeah, if you felt...
If there was room on the bill. I mean, Black Flag Greg Ginn was in like 16 bands at the time, and there was 3 bands that Greg Ginn was in when Black Flag played here, and so there wasn't any room for another band to play. Right. Sometimes we'd be asked to open, because they heard about us, and sometimes we got told not to open.
Right, right.
Stevie Stiletto was the people who knew the band were like, they were very pleased with the band. It was a tight band. It was powerful. It was together, that band. Mm-hmm. And,
And how long did you play with them? How long did that last for?
2-3 years.
Oh, so relatively short in the...
For me at the time, that was fairly long. But, that was a major commitment. Dude, I mean, good God, man. I traded a Les Paul because we ended up somewhere in Indianapolis or Kentucky or Illinois, somewhere with a broken down vehicle. And I traded my Les Paul to get,
Wow.
Well, it's a Gibson. It said Gibson right on it. I didn't care that much about it. So
what were some of the notable gigs you guys had? You toured quite a bit with them in the 2 to 3 years?
But they were short gigs. They were short tours. I think we went out for 6 weeks once, but usually we'd be gone for, we did a lot of weekends. We did a lot of maybe 10 days. We did, long tours for us were 4 weeks, and, Mike Butler had a great saying. He goes, well, first your feet go, then your butt goes, and then your mind goes.
Bass player, right? Mike Butler?
Yeah.
I remember he probably had the longest strap I've ever seen on his bass would basically touch the ground.
No, it didn't touch the ground. It touched his knees.
Right. It was low, though.
Yeah.
I mean, he wore his bass very low.
Well, I wore my guitar low back those days.
Yep. And you always had the sleeves cut off.
Yeah.
The denim jacket, remember, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Cigarette, long hair. Never did the punk spikes or anything like that?
Oh, sure I did. And dyed my hair colors and did all that stuff. But, mostly at that point I was drifting towards Motorhead. I really liked Motorhead, and I when punk rock became hardcore, I wasn't as into hardcore as I had been into punk rock.
Right, yeah.
Punk rock was much cooler. Mm-hmm. And when I heard people putting down the Ramones, I was like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Or the Damned, fuck you. The Damned are great. The Ramones are great.
Yeah.
The Sex Pistols. Dude, the Sex Pistols were a one-record fucking band, and that was it.
Yep.
And it's like, that was good, it was a cool record, but, for me, it wasn't what was interesting. And, you'd get these people who were playing for 20 minutes, and they would think that they were the, beginning and ending of thrash, and that's why we wrote that song, Authority on Thrash, because, what makes you an authority on thrash?
Right. And then moving on from Stiletto, what was your next, was there a reason you left, or was just done, or?
I got fired.
Oh, okay.
I got fired from Stevie Stiletto because 2 reasons. Because I was not interested in buying cowboy clothes, wearing cowboy hats and pointy boots and that, and playing, at the same time, playing metal. What
was the cowboy boots thing about? Ray wanted everybody to wear cowboy gear?
And I was like, are you out of your fucking mind? We need to keep playing what we're playing.
Right.
Because I saw what we had been doing, put out a record after It's a Bogus Life, called Food for Flies, and that was I don't know that the material was as strong on Food for Flies as the material on Bogus Life was, but it was still good. Mm-hmm. and I had people who said that it was a good record and everything else. And then they wanted to go, dress in cowboy gear and play heavy metal. And it was like, I'm not interested in this wearing women's clothing, cowboy gear, and playing heavy metal. I'm just not into it, man. Yeah. I don't want to put on airs, You
just want to be Thommy Berlin.
I just wanted to be the band that we were.
Right.
And I thought all this bullshit was moving away from what that was. And so...
And those records, did Jim DeVito record all your stuff?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very much.
Mm-hmm. He was very, very influential as far as recording some very
Nobody else would let you
bands.
In their studio because they thought you were a punk rock band. They figured you'd be urinating in the corners and whatnot.
Which is not a stretch for you. After the fountain incident outside Mr. Dunderback's, right?
I'd love to say that was the only time that happened.
So, okay, these 3 records you had with Stevie Stiletto, and then your next...
There was 4.
4, okay.
But, and then, me and Rob were always at...
Rob the drummer?
Yeah.
Okay.
We always were bunking heads, because Rob thought that Twisted Sister was the best band he ever heard.
Wow.
He was very into Twisted Sister and Kiss and, bands like that. And I couldn't give a damn about those bands. Mm-hmm. I was much more into up to and including the Dead Kennedys, And, me and Ray saw music very similarly. We loved Bowie and we loved Alex Harvey and we loved these guys. But, I just was not.
You couldn't go.
I was not in any way at the time interested in heavy metal. It just was putting on airs. I just couldn't go for it, man.
Yeah.
And so we were bunking heads, and apparently Steve Gallagher showed up in town with an 8-ball of cocaine and a travel van.
And was he was the guitar player before you and Stevie Stiletto, right?
Yes.
Steve Gallagher, yeah.
And so, it was like free cocaine and a van and what do you call those vacation vans people travel in?
Like an RV.
RV.
Mm-hmm.
And what Mike tells me is the cocaine was great and everything was fabulous until they ran out. And then they were like, oh, fuck, this guy can't fucking play. They couldn't play the material. They couldn't play the stuff that I was on.
So Steve Gallagher came back?
Yeah.
After you left, but you replaced him pretty early on in
Yes.
the band, right? And then he decided to come back and take over when you left.
Right. And it didn't last very long. And he got thrown out of the band because really he couldn't play. He wasn't much of a musician. And then they got this kid from Indianapolis and a drummer from somewhere else. And they were both really nice kids. But the drummer couldn't he had no meter. And the guitar player was
And they were trying this metal stuff and the cowboy gear.
Never got there.
Never did it. Yeah.
They didn't do that. Although they named the next record after my title.
Okay.
Smell the Sock.
Moving on from there, what was your next project?
It was a band called Velvet Elvis. And Velvet Elvis and the Evil Maracas was the same band originally.
Right. And there was a dispute about the name, right? Wasn't there some legality? There was another Velvet Elvis or something, if I recall?
We didn't care. Mm-hmm. We didn't care. We had the name first anyway, but we didn't care. And it was like, really?
Yeah.
We're really concerned.
And then you became Big Velvet Elvis, right? After that? And then Evil Maracas after that?
No, Evil Maracas was a name we would advertise. The Evil Maracas were playing, and we wouldn't let anybody know it was actually us.
Oh, okay.
And so the Evil Maracas had their own fans.
That's hilarious.
Velvet Elvis had fans, Evil Maracas had fans, and sometimes they didn't know about each other. But eventually they did. And it was a lot of fun band. It was
That was Palmer Wood and Chris
Yeah.
McFall
Yeah.
and Botnick?
Steve Botnick.
Steve Botnick, okay. Yeah, I remember
You
those
know,
guys.
all guys that I love very much, and sadly, Chris McFall has just recently died. And
Yeah.
the fact is I loved all those guys. And Carlos came in after Chris McFall left and played bass with us for a while. Finally, I think it was me and Terry Douglas, who was from St. Augustine. He was in David Young's band, one of the first punk rock bands also. David Young and the Restless. But anyway, Terry Douglas was in that band with Chris Gallipo, and he ended up playing with me and Steve, and that was it. I finally had enough. It'd gone as far as it wanted to go.
And why did Chris leave? Was he doing Pretty Boy
McFall-
Fried or something?
No,
or?
Chris decided he wanted to be a television producer.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and he was very talented, man.
We actually went to school together at
did you?
FCCJ. That's
Yeah.
where I met him.
And as you know, Chris was very entertaining. He's a
Yes.
wonderful guy.
Hilarious, yeah.
And, you know, so that's what he wanted to spend his time in the next bit of his future on. You know, when people want to do that, what are you going to say? No, stick with us and don't earn any money and get drunk.
Yeah.
No, you say, go for it, man.
Yeah.
And that's what he did.
So you pressed on with Velvet Elvis without Chris?
Yep.
Okay. And how long did that go for?
Evil Maracas without Chris.
Evil Maracas.
Yeah.
Okay. So did you convert the name from, you just dropped the Velvet Elvis
when
thing?
Palmer left is
Okay,
when we
I
dropped
see.
the Elvis thing, because that was his name.
Right.
And he ended up in Atlanta because he got tired of Jacksonville, and he and his wife ended up divorcing, and so he needed to split. And, you know, so that was that. And my next band was called Thommy Berlin and His Big Head, which is the only time my name appeared in a band that I liked it.
Right.
Because I thought that was a funny name.
Yeah.
And some people liked the band, some people didn't like the band. I liked the band.
What was the sound of that band? Still punkish or?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
It was more rock and roll than what had been going on before. It was very rock and roll kind of, and then after Thommy Berlin and His Big Head, and I ended up with. Again, they were all guys that I loved very much, you know. They weren't musician-wise as good until I got David Young. But David, I don't want to tell stories out of school. David had his own issues, and I'll just leave it at that. But David was very talented. He's still, David, if you're listening, record Little Corolla, man. It's a great song. Anyway.
So then you turned into what after that? What was the next band after your Big Head band?
Radio Berlin.
Oh, and that's where you and I met up again after a long
Yep.
interval. We were doing a gig in Orlando at a place called the Copper Rocket.
Is that what it was called?
Yeah, and there was a band, Radio Berlin. I'm like,
Who are these guys?
And then you come walking in, and I'm like, oh my God, Thommy Berlin's here.
It's Thommy Berlin. I thought you'd be dead by now.
And Roy Peake was in that band, who I hope to have on this show very soon.
I hope so. He's very, very talented guy.
And it was a three-piece, wasn't it? Radio Berlin was three-piece?
Were we a three-piece at that time?
I'm pretty sure. Who was the drummer? Would it have been Botnick or not?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what I remember. And you guys were great. I mean, it was, you know,
we?
yeah, it's just
Good.
really straight ahead, you know, Thommy Berlin-esque punkish tunes.
Well, I listened to some of the recordings of that. I don't usually go backwards, you know, but I listened to some of the recordings of that, and what surprised me was how much it sounded like grunge.
You were a pioneer.
And it was, did I know that grunge even existed at the time? I don't know.
Well, that was 93 or 4.
Was
right?
it that late?
I think so. We played with you in Yeah, it'd have to be after 95 because I was in my band.
There's no way it was after 95, was it?
It'd have to be because I didn't start the Joe Popp band until
Well, I would have
95.
known about grunge in 95.
Yeah, by then, yeah. I don't know how long you were in the band, so maybe you guys were together for a long time? Or?
At this point, not to tell stories out of school, I was taking lots of drugs and drinking a lot. So basically, my memory gets pretty shaky around 92, 93.
Okay.
And I remember some things, and some things are just gone, you know. But, you know, things were about to get a lot worse after Radio Berlin, because we could never get over the hump with Radio Berlin. I think we spent a lot of time running away from audiences, because you'd come and see us one weekend and we'd be playing hardcore, and the next weekend you'd come and see us, we'd be playing reggae. And see, the thing is people don't know it, but reggae was, I've always loved reggae. And oh, that's right. Before I got into Thommy Berlin and Radio Berlin, I did a show I did a year in a Jamaican band.
Wow.
Yeah, buddy. Let me tell you, Rastas do not think that Americans can play reggae. And they do not think that Caucasian Americans can play reggae. So them having me in the band was kind of, it was kind of crazy.
But anyone that knows you knows that influence,
Yeah.
for sure. Like, it definitely comes through in your music. Not so much as like, here's a reggae song, but there is that underlying thing.
Yeah.
Sort of like The Clash has
Sure.
that sort of underlying reggae feel, you know?
It's a sense of time. It's a sense of space. It's rhythm and movement. And see, I understood reggae, and that's what they have a problem with. Jamaicans have a problem with, is people think that it's pop music, and it is not pop music. And you know, for the people, for the Rastafarians, the people who were, you know, the Bob Marleys and the Peter Tosh and, you know, all those guys, you know, it was something much, much more than pop music.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
It was a way of life. I mean, it was tied to the religion, right?
it was church. It was church music,
Yep.
you know. And but anyway, we're going back after Radio Berlin. I pretty much disappeared for a while.
Because of the drugs.
Yeah, because of the drugs, and because I figured nobody wanted to hear me play anymore. Mm-hmm. And it was like, you know, I couldn't make radio. I thought Radio Berlin was a great band, except for the name. And, you know, that was Eddie Platt's fault. He kept naming bands I was in after me. And I was like, no. And the other guys would go, yes. And I'd be like, fuck.
Yeah, well, I like the name Radio Berlin. I think that's a good
We
one.
almost got the new band named after me, too.
Oh.
And we luckily ducked that one. You know, because, I mean, if you have your name in the band, you're automatically the most important person. And that's not the idea. That's not what bands are about. It's like, you don't want to be the person everybody comes up to and asks questions about. Mm-hmm. You know, especially with me. I mean, I've had guys, you know, talk to me about, what kind of guitar do you play? And what do you like for music? And who, you know, what amps are the ones you use?
See, and I think you'd like those questions. You didn't? Because you and I can talk for hours about guitars and strings and picks and everything.
Sure,
you know?
The minutia of music, you and I could go all day.
Yep.
But that's because you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, a little.
No, more than a little, Chuck. Come on, man. The fact of the matter is that, you know, these guys want you to make a commercial, and it's like, so you are a Fender guy. And it's like, no, they don't pay me a nickel, man. Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is that, yeah, I've always been a Telecaster guy or a Stratocaster guy. And the reason is these guitars have sounds, man. Les Pauls are guitars that are, in my opinion, lacking in personality. To me, a Les Paul looks like furniture. Mm-hmm. It doesn't look like an electric guitar.
So let's go there a little bit.
Okay.
You are the primo collector of orphaned instruments. You're like the, you're like the Jacksonville Humane Society for guitars.
Is that what it is?
And it's so funny on Facebook, you'll post, I found this thing in the trash. It just needed new tuners, the neck reset, and a new bridge and new pickups. But it's a great guitar. And is that
often,
sort of what you gravitated to? Is these not no name brand? Like
No. It's just, the universe saw fit for me to have another Strat, Squire, a Silvertone, whatever it happened to be, Yamaha, and
how many do you have? How many? Like 30 something at least, right, or more?
Guitars?
Yeah.
More.
I'm underestimating that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you do a thing called it. What do you call it? Frankentelli or something?
My
what do you do?
Frankentelli.
Yeah, talk about that.
A Frankentelli is a guitar that is okay. What you do is you and your ghouls go out, not necessarily to graveyards, but to graveyards for guitars, which we call pawn shops. Mm-hmm. And we find these freshly buried guitars in pawn shops. And if we find a neck we like, or a body we like, or pickups we like, we buy the guitar. And you hold on to it for a while until you find something that works with it. So let's say you found an Epiphone, and it's sort of shaped like a Les Paul, only it has a bolt-on neck. Now, I know that Gibsons are 24.5, and Fenders are 25.5.
Scale you're talking about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I also know how to overcome that. Mm-hmm. And so I'll put a Strat neck on a Epiphone product, so what it looks like is a Fender Les Paul, which makes me laugh.
Yeah.
So what you do is you put different pickups with different necks so that you come up with a guitar that is unusual. For instance, one of my most successful Frankentellis is a 2-pickup Stratocaster. Why 2 pickups? Because the best sound Fender ever made, in my opinion, for a rhythm guitar is the Telecaster, where you put the treble pickup, the bridge pickup, and the neck pickup on at the same time, which you can't do on a Stratocaster.
Right. You don't have that option.
Right.
It's only the neck and center, or bridge and center,
right,
or each one on their own.
And out of phase.
Out of phase, yeah.
Well, you put 2 pickups on, right? And then you can put them on at the same time in phase. And it's a great rhythm guitar sound. Yeah. And that's what I did with that. So, but I've got about 12 or 20, I guess about 20 Frankentellis that are unusual guitars. They're not Gibsons, they're not Fenders, they're, of course now they're doing it. Fender is doing it,
They're doing everything.
Right.
There's like 400 different Stratocasters you can get now.
Right, exactly. And really, I've had not all of them. I've had 50s Strats, I've had 60s, 70s. By the way, 70s Strats are garbage, don't buy them.
The 3-bolt neck, or just any of them?
The 3-bolt neck.
Yeah, that was a bad
The
move.
worst year for Fenders is 78. Listen to me. People will charge you $1,000 for a 78 Stratocaster. Don't pay it. It sucks.
That's with the big fat headstock, right?
Right.
The ugly
I
one.
like the big headstock. Because when I started playing guitar, that's what a Fender was
Right,
a big
the
headstock.
Fat headstock, yeah.
Hendrix had big fat headstocks.
Right, yeah.
Anyway,
So what's do you have a favorite that you play when you're out playing with the Radio Poets? Is there one you go to, or do you have three that you like that you bring? Or
all of the guitars that are in my permanent collection have to be able to play all night.
Okay.
And there are several different guitars. I have it's called a Jag Master. It was designed in Japan. And what's funny about that guitar was it's a Squier, and the Squier Jagmaster is actually more expensive in the resale market than the Fender Jagmaster. Don't know why. But they sound better, and they play wonderfully. My number one guitar at this point is a Mexican Stratocaster that I changed the pickups out on. And that's been my number one guitar for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I've just recently had to replace the neck because I wore the frets out. Mm-hmm. And I wore them out pretty fast too. It was a drag. So I bought a telly neck, and I put a telly neck on this guitar. Mm-hmm. And another one of those things you're not supposed to be able to do.
Right.
So anyway, that's my main guitar, is a Mexican Strat with a Canadian telly neck.
Mm-hmm. Did we miss any bands? Powerball.
Oh yeah, Powerball.
Talk a little bit about Powerball.
I was in Powerball for more years than any other band I was ever in, and it went a lot of places, and we played.
What was the lineup? Was Roy? Roy was the bass player?
No. Powerball was Mitch, me, Danny Neerman, and Josh Knight. Josh is a great bass player, wonderful guy. Danny, great drummer, wonderful human being. Danny's got more integrity in his pinky toe than most people. And Mitch. And basically what happened was I am not in any way, shape, or form the poster child for drug rehabilitation or sobriety or any of that, okay? But the fact is if you were like me, sobriety was a fucking necessary choice. You had to become sober because otherwise you were going to die. And there was somebody else in Powerball who that was true of. And so we got together and became this band that was punk / hardcore. And
you said it was your longest band. How long did it last for?
We were in that band for 18 years.
Holy crow.
Yeah.
How many records?
Just one. Really?
Wow.
And the deal was we, in the middle of that, me and the other person who was, involved in drugs disappeared for a while. Mm-hmm. And it took me a while to get sober. And
so you became sober in Powerball?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a feat.
Yeah.
Band life is pretty tough to do that.
Yeah. And we just disappeared for however many years it was, and then we got back and we rock and rolled it for a while, and then all of a sudden there was health concerns and stuff was weird, and we stopped playing, and it was like a year goes by and there wasn't even a rehearsal, and nobody said anything. There just wasn't a rehearsal for a year.
Wow.
And then 2 years and there wasn't a rehearsal. Well, the clock's ticking, as you know. I'm an old guy, and it's like I need to play.
What year was this? Recently?
Yeah, this would have been 2019.
Okay, yeah, because I remember hearing about Powerball up to just a few years ago.
Right. Well, Powerball's a great band. We were tough, man. Mm-hmm. Believe me. Mm-hmm. We were very supportive of the scene, and I would still be very supportive of the scene, but my health is so whack-a-mole, Mm-hmm. My back is crazy. I got an infection in my spine that was almost, I mean, we're talking about, skin of your teeth.
Wow.
I could have ended up in a wheelchair. In fact, I just got cleared from the wheelchair about 6 weeks ago.
Wow.
Where my doctor said, okay, I've got good news for you. You won't end up in a wheelchair. And I was like, I didn't know that was still a possibility. And she was like, oh, yeah. And
but look at you now. You've survived all this stuff.
Yeah.
And you're now in Radio Poets.
Yes.
And you're playing. And I know you do have to sit down after a few songs, but you insist
Sometimes.
on standing as much as you can.
Yes.
And that's just, again, you're still my hero, Tommy.
Oh, come on, man. Okay, Radio Poets.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted a 7-piece band. I wanted 2 drummers and 2 guitar players. I wanted singers and guys who bang things
Yeah.
And I got it together a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, for instance, the last time we got 2 drummers, the other drummer was a cat named James, and boy, he could play. Oh, it was so sweet. It was really nice. It was very much the Allman Brothers setup where you had a jazz drummer and a rock drummer.
Yeah.
And that's what it was, and it was happening. And then his job, which was in a film company, gets picked up for a series.
Mm.
And he's got to go to Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Oh, well. All right, James, you go knock it out, man. Go pay for that house and go get that new car, and you gotta.
Well, and you seem supportive of that, like you talked about with Chris McFall. It's like,
sure.
If you have a different dream, you got to kind of
You've got to go
thing,
for it.
Right?
You've got to go for it. See, rock and roll is...
It's very rarely a money-making proposition.
And the fact of the matter is when people have things they want to go try and do, you got to let them go.
Yeah.
And you got to support them, and you got to wish them all the luck in the world, and you leave the door open if they come back.
Sure.
And that's why so often you'll see me talking with guys that I used to play with, and they end up being my friends, in some cases my best friends. And the reason is because I love these guys, man. Sure. Guys and girls, I love them.
Yeah, there's a reason you got together to play music, and that's always going to be there.
Well, if I didn't have a relationship at the beginning, you end up having a relationship with them, and with, like, for instance, Roy is my best friend in the world, man.
Yeah, he's great.
I mean, if Roy needed a kidney, I would be the guy. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we're the same blood type, but. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
Okay, so we're trying to put this giant band together, and we end up with Nathan, who's a guitar player and a keyboard player and a trumpet player, and Pete, and Todd, and me. Gee, this giant band became a 4-piece.
The universe said these 4 guys are going to be the band, and your big band thing didn't really come to fruition.
It did not. But the fact of the matter is the when it comes to rock and roll, you go where it sends you half the time, and if you can direct it, good luck to you. I mean, I've known all kinds of guys in the business, and Stan Lynch, who's the drummer for Tom Petty for years, he goes, "You've had the best, most interesting career I ever heard of." And I was like, "What the hell are you talking about, career?" And he goes, "No, I'm serious, man." He goes, "Look, the most fun you can have as a musician is when you've got the band together and you're making music and you're out there and nobody owns a piece of you. And you're out there and you're doing it, that's the best." And he goes, "Once you get signed, it's over. Then you spend, 30% of your time doing nothing but business. And then you spend, 50% of your time doing nothing but business. And 30% of your time going places."
Right.
And then
they want to control you, right? They want to dictate what you put out and pick the songs that they want to put on the record.
And they suggest, "Well, we think you should try some country this time." or whatever. And
that's why you quit Stevie Stiletto. You didn't want to wear the cowboy boots.
No, I just wasn't. I thought it was the stupidest thing we could have done. And Mike thinks that, he has told me that he thinks that I was right, that, Stevie Stiletto should have kept doing what we were doing and we would have been like Aerosmith, is what he said. And I kind of agree. But the fact is radio poets are... I've never had an audience sing along with me before, and that happens now. And I don't know what I've done to encourage people to do it, but I'm kind of like, I don't want to overanalyze it because I don't want it to stop,
That's great. And what gigs do you have lined up right now?
You're talking to the wrong guy, dude. I don't do the business. They just tell me where to stand, man, and that's fine, But luckily those guys are doing it. So I know I've got this one gig on October the 18th with a couple of guys, and I'm really looking forward to that. That's not Radio Poets.
That's not. That's Thommy Berlin solo. I think you should bring the big head name back.
Well, I think that calling us the Three Amigos would be the way to go.
I like that, but I looked it up. There's already a band called that.
No way.
Tres Amigos. Yeah,
there is.
Yeah,
and
they're a mariachi band. I was going to change the bill to that. So.
Oh man.
Everything's a band. You can't pick a name without it being a band anymore.
Radio Poets are in the Radio Poets.
That's great. That's great. Well, Thommy, thanks for coming into the studio today. I appreciate it. Thommy Berlin.
Hey.
Notorious Jacksonville musician.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming in today, Thommy. Sure. We appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.
And if you hear about the Radio Poets playing somewhere, come out and see us, man.
Popp Rock Shop. We make cool stuff.